What if one of the oldest herbs in your kitchen has also been studied for memory? Sage has a centuries-old reputation for wisdom and remembrance, but the science behind that reputation is much more interesting than a simple memory herb label. Stay with me and you'll discover why sage became connected with wisdom, what small human studies have found about memory, what those studies cannot prove, how to use sage simply in food, how to grow it, and why concentrated sage products deserve caution. The word sage can refer to many plants in the genus Salvia. For this story, we are mainly talking about common sage, Salvia officinalis. Common sage is an aromatic shrub native to the Mediterranean region and parts of the Middle East. Its gray-green leaves are thick, slightly wrinkled, and covered with tiny hairs. Those leaves are one reason sage is so distinctive. Rub one gently and the fragrance is strong, warm, and slightly camphor-like. Sage has traveled a remarkable cultural journey, from the Mediterranean kitchen to traditional European herbal medicine, family gardens, and eventually modern laboratories. Its reputation became so strong that sage was associated with wisdom and long life. But symbolism and medicine are not the same thing. Traditional herbal sources have used sage for digestive, respiratory, mouth and throat, skin, and other complaints. Modern sources emphasize that the overall evidence remains limited. The European Medicines Agency recognizes traditional uses for some sage leaf preparations involving the mouth and throat, minor skin problems, and certain digestive complaints. Traditional use is a specific evidence category, not the same as proven efficacy from strong modern trials. So where did the famous memory story come from? It comes from both tradition and a handful of human studies that make the question genuinely worth investigating. One controlled study looked at healthy older adults over 65. 20 volunteers received different amounts of a standardized sage extract and a placebo on separate study visits. The researchers tested memory and attention repeatedly over 6 hours. One of the tested extract conditions showed improvements on a measure of secondary memory and on attention accuracy. That sounds exciting. But the study was small, short-term, and focused on immediate test performance. It did not prove that sage prevents dementia or preserves memory for years. Another trial studied people with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. It found a signal worth studying, but one trial cannot establish a treatment for a complex disease. Nsai summarizes the evidence carefully. A few small studies suggest sage may improve scores on some memory or cognition tests in healthy people, but the amount of evidence is small and more research is needed. That is the kind of conclusion we should prefer, interesting enough to keep studying, but cautious enough not to turn a kitchen herb into a miracle drug. Scientists have also studied sage for hot flashes, cholesterol, blood sugar, sore throat, mood, and other questions. The results vary, and none should be turned into a universal health promise. For many people, sage already has one completely ordinary and useful job, making food taste better. Fresh sage has a powerful flavor, so a little can go a long way. Whole leaves can be fried or gently cooked, while chopped leaves work well in sauces, vegetables, beans, and soups. A simple way to begin is to pair sage with foods that naturally welcome savory flavors: squash, beans, potatoes, onions, poultry, and browned butter. If you grow sage, fresh leaves can be harvested as needed. Snipping a few healthy tips is very different from repeatedly stripping the plant bare. Sage tea has a long traditional history, including uses related to the mouth and throat. But medicinal tea is different from normal culinary use, and stronger is not automatically better. This is especially important because sage contains thujone. High amounts or long-term use can be unsafe, and sage essential oil can contain particularly high concentrations. Nsai notes that sage is likely safe in the amounts commonly found in foods, while high-dose or long-term use may not be safe. That means a recipe using a little sage and a concentrated herbal product are not interchangeable conversations. Sage essential oil deserves particular caution. Cases of seizures have been associated with sage oil, and high thujone exposure can be dangerous. So this is not the place for homemade experiments with concentrated essential oil. When a product is highly concentrated, follow the product guidance and get professional advice when needed. People who are pregnant should be especially cautious with medicinal sage because of thujone. Safety during breastfeeding is also not well established. And if you take regular medicines, remember that herbs and medicines can interact. Showing a pharmacist the exact product is more useful than simply saying, "It's just sage." Now let's leave the laboratory and go back to the garden. Sage is one of the friendlier herbs for home growers when you give it the conditions it prefers. Give common sage plenty of sunlight and soil that drains well. It dislikes sitting with wet roots for long periods. A container can work beautifully. Choose a pot with a real drainage hole and avoid letting water sit permanently in the saucer. Once established, sage tolerates drier conditions better than many soft-leaved herbs. The goal is not constant wetness. Trim lightly after flowering or when growth becomes woody, but always leave healthy leafy growth so the plant can recover. You can start sage from seed, but a healthy cutting can be a simpler route to a new plant because it preserves the characteristics of the parent plant. Choose a non-flowering tip, remove the lower leaves, and place the cutting into a light, well-drained growing medium. Keep it gently moist while roots develop. Sage is also a useful reminder that plants have different personalities. A herb that loves sun and dry roots should not be watered like a thirsty tropical plant. If you want a reliable supply of culinary sage, a single healthy plant can provide leaves for a surprisingly long time with light harvesting. And because the leaves are visually distinctive, sage can make a beautiful subject for a kitchen garden as well as a practical herb. So where does that leave the famous memory story? The fairest answer is this: sage has a genuinely interesting scientific signal, but not enough evidence to call it a proven memory treatment. Its traditional history makes the question fascinating. Its small human studies make the question worth researching. But the limitations are just as important as the exciting findings. For everyday life, sage may be most valuable when you stop asking it to be a miracle medicine and simply appreciate what it already does well. Use it as a flavorful herb. Grow it in a sunny pot. Learn the plant. And when you are considering concentrated herbal products, respect the difference between a leaf and a highly concentrated extract. If memory changes are new, worsening, or affecting everyday life, do not rely on sage. Memory problems can have many causes that deserve proper medical evaluation. That may be the biggest lesson of all: curiosity is useful, but certainty should be earned. Sage carries a beautiful old reputation for wisdom. Modern science has given us another kind of wisdom, the ability to say, "We have an interesting clue, but we need better evidence." And that makes sage more interesting, not less. Because the real story is not a miracle, it is a plant, a tradition, a handful of intriguing studies, and many questions still waiting for good answers. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Plant Lore After 60. We will keep looking at familiar plants and separating traditional wisdom from claims that deserve a closer